change the world and deliver great wrestling. A good example for the youth is what we represent. Build your own brand, anything is possible. Focus on your goals, nothing is stopping you.
Let's get ready to podcast.
It was a Christopher Daniels, collectively known as SoCal Uncensored, or SCU. You are listening to the Elite Podcast, and it is the worst podcast I've ever been on.
All the way through,
SCU
all
later.
And
Welcome back, everyone, to another exciting edition of the All Elite Podcast. We're a day late due to some work scheduling issues and a couple of issues we ran into there, but nonetheless, we are back for another episode, and I am back, as always, with your boy, Bitter Mark, All Elite Wrestling fan. AJ, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. Not much new. Just been running errands, trying to write. Not much else.
Are you finished with those errands?
No, not finished with those errands.
That's cool, man. I mean, there's really not been a lot going on in my life either, honestly. It's that time of year where things start to slow down, Christmas time, where I just got to buckle down and put in those hours at work and save up the money for Christmas so me, my daughter, my family, everyone can have a good holiday season. Thanksgiving, obviously, right around the corner as well, so ready to stuff our bellies for that. But nonetheless, quite a bit to talk about on this week's episode of the All Elite Podcast, though, so we will jump right into things. We've got the full gear buys, the estimated buys at least of around 110,000. I didn't really look too deep into the splits with cable and streaming buys, but I have to assume that they're probably getting more streaming buys than the traditional cable buys.
Yeah.
And I also it's nice to see that they're at least pulling 110,000. That's not a horrible number. It's a relatively consistent number. And for their high-priced pay-per-views, that's not something to be disappointed in, so.
Yeah, and this was on, it tracked. All Out did, 100, I think 110, around the same. So this is pretty good. I think it's actually up from All Out. I checked before the podcast, and I'm pretty sure we're about 10,000 up from All Out.
Yeah, so that's definitely something to be excited about, or at least proud of. Now, I don't know if they had anticipated maybe that they would have been able to move the needle a little bit more, especially with the Dynamite number being a relatively consistent 900,000 or so, getting pretty low in some weeks, going down to that 750, but really, it's still not a disappointing number. That's at least 10% of your audience essentially is willing to buy your pay-per-views, and they're consistently willing to buy them. Every pay-per-view has been right around this number. So, and this number is something like, again, we compare AEW to WWE a lot, but if you compare it to TNA sales of pay-per-view or Ring of Honor sales of pay-per-view, this is way, way better than that, and then their consistent average. So AEW has that to be excited about. We also have the Dynamite number in for last week. It was 950,000 coming off the pay-per-view, so that is an exciting number. People who are paying attention to NXT obviously know that there are some exciting things going on that product, and people had expected that could have been the week where things had sort of flipped. AEW at least had the thing in their favor of coming off of a really exciting pay-per-view, so I think that helped them really maintain their number, and it sort of surprised some people that essentially AEW and NXT leveled out to where we were in week one, basically.
Yeah, it was a fantastic number, and yeah, we're almost cracking 1 million, and I wouldn't be surprised if we do crack 1 million soon in the future.
Yeah, that's definitely something to be excited about. 950,000 and a good bounce back after the last couple of weeks worth. Like I said, people were a little bit concerned and worried, but needless to say, AEW has that consistent around 1 million fan base.
Yeah, and it's a great number for AEW, and TNT, I imagine, is thrilled every week, because not only is it a great number, but that 18 to 35 is consistently a great number.
Yeah, so, the 18 to 35 has dropped a little bit, so it's not necessarily where they were week one, but again, it's consistently been a positive number, right around there with WWE's secondary and above NXT, so it's something to be impressed with, definitely, and something to just say that this has been a successful venture for Tony Khan. And speaking of Tony Khan, he happened to respond to a tweet from CM Punk. Punk, as many people know, has joined the WWE. I'm not the what's it called backstage. The backstage show really took Twitter by storm last week. I think people won't tune into the show, but they will absolutely pop in for his clips or whatever gets shared on social, because anything too exciting will be on social media, and that's really all you'll have to tune in for. But nonetheless, Punk then tweeted out about that, how he was going to drop some crazy stuff, and happened to tag Tony Khan at the end of the tweet. Tony Khan ended up responding, essentially referencing the Saudi Arabia thing. From there, Randy Orton gets involved and says something to Tony Khan about throwing stones in a glass house, and has an article from like a year ago, to which Khan responds and says, "I thought you only tag me in things when..." What was it? Oh, you only when you want leverage, yeah. So a weird interaction. I didn't hate Tony for doing it. It's actually kind of interesting to see this dynamic from an owner who is like knows what's going on, and it's impossible to ignore the tweets and the social media shitstorm that comes of CM Punk, of all people, tweeting your name. But it is interesting, and it is getting people talking, and I don't blame Punk for doing it either. I don't blame really anyone for anything in this situation. I do think it was just kind of weird and kind of tacky, but it was whatever.
It's a little unprofessional coming from the CEO. Yeah, like you said, though, it's good that he has his finger on the pulse. It's good to know that he's involved in everything that's going on. And to be fair, if this was 20 years ago and the Monday Night Wars were going on and had Twitter, I'm sure that it would be much worse.
Yeah, for sure. And it's just interesting to see him obviously directly respond to Randy now, regarding the leverage thing. It does show a little bit of a sign of maybe like frustration or something that he missed out on that get. Because while it was pretty clear it was for leverage, in the event that Randy and the Revival left WWE for AEW, that is an NWO type of moment, you know? So you can't say that Tony probably wasn't a little bit like, shoot, they got him really early on in this, but so it was weird, just a weird thing, I think, to see, if nothing else. And that's just the age we live in of social media, where younger like, you would never see Vince doing this because he's just not tech savvy and social media savvy, but younger owners of just businesses in general are going to be like always on social media anyway, so these things will happen.
I'm just surprised he did it, because this is something that really only trended on Twitter. It didn't even trend on Google. Like, as cool as it is, and everything that CM Punk is in a wrestling scene again, it really isn't that big of a deal. Yeah,
so it was definitely, it was weird too, especially because, like I said, both guys are gets that Khan would have wanted. So he should have just sort of let it be. But
yeah,
it's not the end of the world. It's nothing too big or anything to worry about. So just interesting to note. Another interesting thing to note, Kenny Omega is going to be hosting the Capcom Cup. I don't think we'll spend too much time on this because I'm not even too familiar with the Capcom Cup or what even falls under the Capcom banner. But to see that Omega is at least able to do these cross-promotional things with big name companies. I know that Capcom is a bigger company, despite my ignorance to the company. I know that it's a big enough gaming company that this is definitely interesting and right up Omega's alley. So for anyone interested in that, definitely search the interwebs for more information on that, because that's pretty cool. We also got the announcement of AEW talking about a Bash at the Beach themed episode of Dynamite in Miami, something that I think we talked about the Miami episode on our last podcast, but they announced a theme for it now, which is weird because we're getting into the beginning of January. Every Dynamite has a theme for the first month, where it's like homecoming and then reunion, like, you know what I mean? The reunion, the anniversary, then this, and then the next week they had also announced is actually going to take place at sea. The entire episode will be airing from Jericho's cruise, which is pretty cool.
That'll be kind of sick, yeah.
Very cool for anyone who has already purchased a ticket for the cruise, because if you haven't, it's too late. So that's very interesting and a very cool thing for anyone who will get to be involved in that. And I think it's a cool theme and a cool thing that they're doing. I just am like, I'm confused where, like, all of a sudden, because it's a line of themed episodes, it's very weird, kind of like, because in wrestling and when there's consistent themes for episodes, it's kind of tacky. All it reminds me of is like the $1 million episodes of Raw and the guest host episodes. Like, and I know that's not exactly what this is. It's just kind of
I kind of like it. I'm into it. I don't know. My issue is not that they're having themed episodes. It's like you said, that it's back to back to back.
Yeah, and I think that's literally it. Because then it's just gonna stop. You know what I mean? So if it had been, what I would have preferred is especially something like Bash at the Beach be like a BR Live special. Somehow have that be like the next non-pay-per-view big event that we're building to. And that's the weird thing about them being. That's the weird thing about them being all in a row. You know what I'm saying? Because these themed events, you would sort of build to them, but we're not really building now. Well, you can build to one of them, but you're not going to build to all three of them separately. I mean, but it does work with AEW, especially because they're a company with a a roster that's deep enough that we come into every week saying essentially like, wow, that could be a takeover card. So it does work. It's just a little strange, and I'm curious to see how that'll work and what like how different it'll be with themed episodes essentially 4 weeks in a row.
Yeah, it's a little odd, but I don't know. I'm interested to see how they do it. And like you said, they can stack cards, or they've proven they can stack cards. So we'll see.
Yeah, and it gives them a lot of opportunity to do interesting things with the Bash at the Beach theme. Just a theme of a show on a cruise. I mean, they obviously, Ring of Honor partnered with Jericho, I believe, on the previous cruise. So this has sort of been done before, but still not on TV, or not on TV in the 2019 era, I guess I should say. There were crazier things in WCW where people were getting thrown into pools and such. I mean, that's essentially what I'm trying to allude to, is that we're going to down that area where crazy cool things like that could happen where you're not used to seeing it, but with these themes we could definitely see it. And it's cool to see these kind of themes rather than like Thanksgiving Dynamite or Christmas Dynamite, or instead we get announcements that Dynamite before Christmas is going to be a highlights episode and like a closeout for the year and stuff, and we're going to give people time off. Like, these are much better themes for your episodic television, but it's different. And I'm just curious to see if it's something they'll continue throughout the beginning of the year, or like I said, if this is going to be it, we're going to come off of that cruise and sort of go back into just Dynamite here, Dynamite there.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the case, and that's where it gets a little weird, because you can't make a distinction of what is a big show and what isn't.
Yeah, that's kind of like I said, it just you have it for a certain amount of time and then it stops abruptly.
Yeah.
But that's all right. Something that's not stopping abruptly is the Joey Janela versus Shawn Spears feud, but the way that they're continuing it is definitely interesting. I'm not sure if you saw, but Tully Blanchard did an interview following Joey's attack last week and essentially said that Spears has already done this. Like, he's been down this road with Janela, he beat him, and he's closing that chapter and moving on to better things. And from a storyline perspective, it's not wrong, and it's pretty interesting, and it gives us an idea of the chances, like we talked about Joey versus Kip. We could still see that, where Spears is essentially saying, I'm not going to do this until you have a reason to, and then we build to a reason to. So I'm curious to see where this goes. I like Joey Janela a lot, and I'm fine with the Spears build, and I like this. It's not just like, oh, he attacked him, so we're going straight to another match. They're going to make him somehow earn a match with Shawn Spears and make it feel like he's earning it, because he technically did lose. So I like it.
I like it too. I think it's a good way to go about this feud, and I think more and more that the Kip Sabian thing is just not happening. Not happening ever, I mean, but like not happening right now.
Yeah, exactly. Something that is happening right now, actually right now, is we're airing a day late. We're airing at the same time as Dark. Let's go ahead and talk about the Dark match card. Neither of us have actually seen the show, as I said, it's going on right now, but let's talk about the matches. We have first Rio and Britt Baker versus Chris Statlander and Big Swole. Not too familiar with Statlander, but I am very familiar with Big Swole, so that is cool to see her back. I'm excited to tune into that once we're done here. What are your thoughts on that one?
It's cool. We're going to get to see a new face in AEW. I think that's going to be interesting. And we've seen a lot of times where new women have come in, and after a few matches, they get signed. So who knows? This could be a future member of the roster.
Yeah, for sure. And the interesting thing, or something I'm just sort of thinking about, it's not necessarily 50-50 booking, but AEW does this smart thing of pairing up two people that they want to give wins to and sort of have them rack it up. We're obviously going down the road of Rio versus Britt, so a win for Rio and Britt here, you would have to assume, would bump up both women and not really hurt either's record, and help. Like, this gives AEW a reason to not always do Rio and random partner versus Britt and random partner, because you can't really affect their losses that way. So it's better to team up two people who are going to be facing off down the line. So it's interesting. It's their way of racking up wins for people, which is smart, because we'll get into it, but when I saw the new rankings for this week, Britt Baker's win-loss was it blew my mind because of how many matches she's had compared to most of the other people in the whole roster.
Yeah.
After that match, we will have Best Friends versus Private Party. This one should be great. Another awesome tag team match. And then in the main event, we'll have we'll have the Strong Hearts versus the Young Bucks. That should be fun.
This is going to be a great match.
Yeah, the Strong Hearts are definitely getting an opportunity here to showcase themselves. Very cool to see the Young Bucks and Private Party on the same show as well. Both teams potentially picking up a win, and you never know what we could see from those two teams again, just because they did so well in the past. So, interesting there.
Did they shoot Young Bucks and Strong Hearts after the show? Because that doesn't make any sense.
I think they did. I'm not really sure. I guess you keep people around for the Young Bucks, so that's how.
I mean, if they did, didn't they get put through the table?
Yeah. Yeah, but people just stay around to see a Young Bucks match. I don't know. I mean, maybe I would assume from that perspective, no. Maybe that was the first match of the show.
I would hope so.
That would at least explain if there was any confusion why the Young Bucks would have been on first. But yeah, also on this week's episode of Dark, they'll have Justin Roberts, Undesirable. That's fine. I'm not interested in that. I understand why Justin Roberts.
I like Undesirable.
I do, but I don't like Justin Roberts. So, I mean,
why not?
I don't hate him, but it's just I don't think he needs this much attention. I don't think that. I think this falls under the same category of things I complained about a lot in the early days of the podcast when we were watching Road 2, is we could be focusing on wrestlers that are very important rather than an announcer and a referee. And the Aubrey thing was okay because I think it did help, and I think it was beneficial. But I don't think that this is that serious. I think that giving referees like a character is a lot more beneficial to a storytelling perspective than just having to explain why Justin Roberts means much. And they'll just use it as an opportunity probably to talk shit about JBL, bullying him. So, I mean, it's fine. It's just that was all kind of old. So, and then they'll also have Dustin on commentary, which will be great. Dustin Rhodes, I should be clear, because anyone who might want Chucky T back on commentary, not this week. But Dustin, yeah, that should be good. Dustin Rhodes could be a good fit on commentary down the road. Eventually coming out of a wrestling role. So that is something that I wouldn't be too surprised about seeing down the line.
Yeah, and we know he can talk. And it's also good because they're still playing up that injury, and this is a good way to use him.
Yeah, exactly. Keep him on TV or on the internet show at least, and like I said, he's going to be a great commentator. Some guys don't really fit the commentary role super well on television. That was the thing I noticed with Chuck Taylor even. He didn't fit Dark super well because he had to be a lot more professional, and you could tell he didn't, he's so used to when he's on commentary with Excalibur to being able to say whatever he wants in a joking fashion. And he still did do a lot of that, but you could tell he had to be more professional. Yeah. So it felt different. Whereas Dustin has so much time in wrestling and doing things like commentary that I can imagine he's going to make everyone in the ring sound better based on his commentary. So, and then one last bit of news that I actually forgot to mention. Chris Jericho is apparently going to make a huge announcement for this week's episode of Dynamite. I have no idea what this could be, just because why would Jericho be making an announcement unless it's that MJF and Wardlow are maybe joining him, which I wouldn't like that either.
No.
So I'm hoping that's not it. And I would almost like to see maybe if MJF and Wardlow kill him too. If they kind of tease that, maybe MJF and Wardlow have told him in the back right now, oh yeah, we're going to join you. Then on the segment on Dynamite, they just kill him. I would like that. That would be entertaining.
The only other thing I could think of was maybe he's going to introduce a girl into the inner circle, because his goal right now seems to be winning all the titles. So
that would be pretty cool, and I could also see that being the thing, and that would be, if done properly, they choose the right woman for the job. I think that would be really cool and really interesting. I don't know exactly who I would pick for that. Maybe when we go through the rankings here in a minute, I'll have more of an idea. But yeah, interesting thought from you for sure, that of all the announcements that Jericho could be making, that would make the most sense, because I don't really see AEW doing the WWE thing where you have your champion go out and maybe announce, oh, we're going to do a TV title tournament, like something like that.
Yeah.
I don't see his announcement pertaining to anything but him, so that makes sense.
Yeah.
But also announced for this week's episode of Dynamite, on last week's episode, they announced the Dynamite Dozen Battle Royal, something that we're not super clear on. It's going to be 12 people in a Battle Royal fighting for a ring. They noted that the final 2 men in the Battle Royal would then compete in a singles match. The way that I understood it was that the singles match would take place next week. However, if it happens this week, I will just chalk that up to me totally misunderstanding the announcement. But
they weren't very clear about it, like you said. It could be, but if they were doing it that way, you'd think they would call it a gauntlet match.
You would, but it will be interesting nonetheless. I'm curious to see if this ring means anything, if it just like makes you automatically number 2 in the rankings or number 1 in the rankings or something makes it mean something, or if it's just a ring and then like maybe next week they're fighting over the Dynamite Dozen ring, which would be, I wouldn't like that.
I wouldn't like it, but well, I don't know. I don't know. I would like it more if it means nothing, for it to just be a trophy.
Yeah, like it just is a random, but it's so random. Like, even if it were going to be a trophy, you should have had like qualification matches and like a reason for it to mean something, rather than just telling me it means something and that's it, because a ring has never meant something in wrestling in any way.
Well, the Hall of Fame thing anyways.
It's just going to become a prop. Like, that's essentially, it's going to become something for Sean Spears or someone to punch people in the head with. So in that circumstance, that's where I don't like there being much of an explanation beforehand, just because, again, like you said, if it was a trophy, like you said, King of the Ring last week, then that should be something we're qualifying for. We're having people like get random draws into or something to make it make sense. Instead, it doesn't really make any sense. So, well, I mean, it makes some sense. Like, they've explained it, but there's stuff that doesn't make sense about it yet.
It's odd. It's definitely odd.
I think they'll explain it more on tomorrow's episode, or I would hope so. So we'll have to wait and see. But also announced, we have Darby Allin versus Jon Moxley, also announced on last week's episode. That is going to be a banger of a match that I hope leads to another match. So I don't really know if we'll get any victor here, or maybe this is another one where Darby could take a loss and still be put over from the match itself. So should be great. I've watched clips of them in NEW, I believe it was, from the early on stages of Moxley joining AEW and stuff like that. So this match I had sort of seen coming, but not so soon. So I'm curious to see how it will be done and how good of a job Mox does at making Darby into more of a star, because I feel like that should be our goal every time Darby's in a match with anyone. Like, and not necessarily that Mox should be losing any credibility. Like, Mox could also get over from this match, but the main goal should be to get Darby over. So, and then in a match that's being billed as a dream match, and a match that I'm honestly really interested in, we have Phoenix versus Nick Jackson. Nick Jackson and Phoenix actually are both like really promoted as two guys who are super underrated as just wrestlers who can wrestle really well. And I've noticed that with Nick Jackson a lot in his tag team matches and stuff with AEW. Like, he's the one who gets to turn it up a notch, and he's the one who is a little bit more technically sound and probably a little bit faster because he's the younger one and just has a little bit more juice in him. So, like, love Nick. Phoenix, basically the same thing. A little bit younger, just a little bit more juice in the tank. He's built, like, he's smaller, so he's, like, Pentagon just has a bit of a gut on him. He can't do as much of the flippy stuff. But everything Phoenix does flippy is super, super, like, precise and sound and beautifully done. Yes, clean is the perfect word for it. So this one, This is a fun one, and this is one
This is going to be great.
This is one of the instances where I'm appreciating what AEW is doing that is different in wrestling, where sometimes your tag teams split up and they have it like Jack Evans. He got taken away from Angelico for a couple matches, did some singles stuff. I would love to see both of these guys as singles competitors, Phoenix and Nick Jackson. I would love to see either one of the Young Bucks sort of do their own run as a singles guy, just because I think they could really shine. And if it was Nick, it would be like, I think Nick's the one that would be the one to stand out and kill it, as especially like a face who can just work and work well. So I think this match is going to be just a banger, dude.
It's going to be crazy. This is going to be a week where potentially this could be one of the better episodes of Dynamite we've had in a long time, just because of these two matches. And
battle royals are always exciting.
Yeah.
So
it's going to be hard to pick a main event.
Yeah, when we do Wednesday night's main event tomorrow night, it's going to be difficult. That match, like I said, I'm excited for it. I'm excited for Phoenix to get that opportunity to shine as a singles competitor. And like I said, Nick, he's just so great. Like, this is one of the weird matches from AEW as like a match on Dynamite that we're previewing that I could probably spend a solid 5 minutes just talking about how cool of a match it is to me, because it's so different, because these two are almost always paired in a team. Phoenix did have that run for a while in the early stages of his career where he was doing more singles work, but for the last couple of years, it's been a lot of stuff with Pentagon. Now in AAA, he does do a lot more singles stuff. He got that singles run as champion, got to work with Omega. So it's just like Phoenix has done so much in the last year that this is a big opportunity and a great chance for a great match between both guys.
I like that it makes sense, too, because you have Matt Jackson getting put through the stage last week, so he's not wrestling this week, so you give him a singles match with Nick Jackson and Phoenix, which is perfect.
Exactly. This week we're actually going to do another rundown on the rankings, because they updated the rankings on Friday, so we won't do a full recap of Being the Elite. But seeing as we're talking about it, let's talk about how Matt Jackson is apparently not cleared based on this episode's week of Being the Elite.
Mm-hmm. They just opened with it saying Brandon Cutler and Nick Jackson talking about how Matt Jackson wouldn't be cleared and how he's in the hotel room and this and that. But it was really quick and kind of brushed off, but they just hadn't mentioned that.
Yeah, that's good to note, though. Like, and interesting, I wonder if that means he won't be at the show at all. Kenny Omega wasn't cleared for last week's show, and we really didn't see him. Anytime Christopher Daniels hasn't been cleared, we haven't seen him. I would like that. I would like that to be a thing, where you can essentially just assume if someone's not medically cleared to compete, they're not even in the arena. It gives you a lot more to do with storyline. It gives you the opportunity for now Nick to get destroyed by Proud and Powerful, or anything like that. But I would appreciate that. I wouldn't want to see like Matt just automatically come running down the stage all fine, despite not being medically cleared, and then getting destroyed by Proud and Powerful, and then next week he's able to work again, but he wasn't cleared to compete. There's wouldn't make much sense.
Yeah, no, I totally agree, and I like the idea of them just not being present whenever they're not cleared.
And another big thing worth noting that honestly doesn't make a ton of sense to me, Adam Page has left the Elite.
Yeah, so he says he walked into the room with the Young Bucks. He said he's tired of being the least successful member of the Elite. He can't do it anymore. And that he said they're still cool, but he's going to ride solo. Then they did a little video of him walking in his house and turning down a picture. And it was, I don't know if it's a joke or if it's just being the Elite or what. But as far as that's on record, he said he left the Elite.
I'm buying it, man. I'm not thinking of it as a joke. I'm assuming tomorrow night's episode of Dynamite, we will walk in and we will go into it, and whenever Hangman is mentioned, they won't do a big spiel about it. It won't be some big breakup, but they'll be like, Hangman is not part of the Elite anymore. He wants to do his own thing, and it's not necessarily a heel turn, but like a solo run. It's different, and I'm fine with it, but I don't think it was even that necessary.
No,
the elite to me is literally just Kenny and the Bucks. So I mean, I get that there's an extension with Hangman, Marty, and Cody, but I mean that's
it. You're right. It feels more like Kenny and the Bucks, and so him leaving, like you said, unnecessary. It just seems a little odd.
Yep, but I'm curious to see where it goes. It could definitely lead to a decent story for Hangman. And maybe he crosses paths with Kenny or anyone else in the Elite down the road. In some type of way. And the interesting, or like the disappointing thing, I guess I would say, is I was loving his tag team matches with random members of the Elite, with his matches with like Dustin and Kenny, and I would have to assume he would have some with Cody coming up because Cody doesn't have MJF to team with anymore, so they ripped that potential from us. So I don't know. I'm curious to see where that leads. Like you said, I would imagine definitely they have to reference it in some way on TV this week, just because if that's how you had it on being the Elite, and then it just, like, unless they just, then it's either they reference it on TV or they have completely disconnected the two shows, which is fine by me, but I'm also fine with it if this is their way of being like, okay, we're going to separate, and he's just not on the show anymore. He doesn't really do that, because I don't think the show ever benefited Hangman the way it helped a lot of other people.
Yeah, no, not really, and it kind of honestly hurt him more than it benefited him.
I think it helped to keep his face out there and to showcase him on a platform that they were consistently getting people to tune into, but I don't think it necessarily did him a lot of favors when we were trying to build him up to be the top guy superstar. Again, like I said, it was just essentially a spot to showcase him, not really a spot to promote him or put him over or tell his story or do anything really cool or crazy that they could have done. So I think that it just gives him an opportunity to be maybe more of his own fresh thing. We'll have to wait and see where that really turns out for him, though.
Yeah.
But those are the two big notes for Being the Elite this week. We will potentially get back into more of a Being the Elite recap, but with us having to cover the rankings every week, we'll have to see how that all works out. But every Friday they will be updating the rankings. I'm not sure how I love this. It's different. It makes things a little weird, or I don't know. I guess I don't know how to explain.
I'd rather it be monthly.
Yeah, I just would rather it be monthly. I think it's going to be more of a pain in their ass and a pain in everyone else's ass to do it every week, and they could have just went monthly. But nonetheless, let's go ahead, and this time we'll start with the men's division off the top. Coming in at number 1 in the men's division, Pac, last week at number 2. Cody Rhodes at number 2 this week, last week at number 1. Confused why he's even listed. He's no longer a competitor for the World Championship. So, and without another championship established yet, it just makes no sense to have him ranked. Number 3, Hangman last week, also number 3, so he stays steady. Jon Moxley in at number 4, last week at number 5. And Darby Allin breaking in the rankings for the first time at number 5 last week, not ranked. So
yeah, which is what we wanted. We were talking about Darby Allin wanting him to get up there, and so that's cool.
The one thing I will say is if we take Cody out, I don't know who we shift in at number 5. I'm sure if you gave me a little time to think about it, I could figure someone out, but
yeah, I'm kind of at a loss too.
Because no one's really stood out for that spot.
Not really.
Once again, I'm going to have to say it, Shawn Spears. It would have to be him at number 5, and that would make sense to me because he continues to win and do well for himself. So,
because the only one I had in mind at that moment was Jimmy Havoc, and I'm like, well, he's been losing a lot.
Yeah, even to the commentators. So,
yeah.
So, yeah, I think this is a fine ranking, but again, if Cody's not in line for any championship, having him at number 2 is just wasting a spot for people. So it's not necessary.
Yeah.
But I do like it. At that point, again, I have to make then an argument that Shawn Spears, and I would slot Spears in at number 5, or maybe even push Moxley up to 4 and put Spears, or Moxley up to 3 and put Spears in at 4 right above Darby. Just to then if Darby beats Moxley, it's more of like a big deal because he beat someone 2 ranks above him. But it's fine. I think that Hangman, he lost last week. He lost to Pac. He also had a win to Pac, so I guess it kind of evens out. But
yeah, and it's cool seeing Pac at number 1. And the way it looks, I don't know for sure because it seems like the Pac and Hangman feud should be over. But they seem like the candidates, if anybody, to fight to get a shot at the title.
Yeah, for sure. I think that maybe we'll get like Pac against whoever wins that Dynamite Dozen match for a number 1 contendership or something like that. That would be a good way to do it. A good way to establish maybe a random person that we're not really thinking about too much in AEW right now as a potential contender. So that would be cool and interesting. Even someone like Luchasaurus. I know that people want to see him in that trios or tag team situation with the Jurassic Express, but him coming back and being as over as he is, it would be very intelligent, I think, to pull him in as someone who wins that battle royal, doesn't really give a fuck about the ring, and then doesn't beat Pac but loses to Pac in a number one contenders match. I think Pac is a great number one contender for Jericho and a solid next person in line.
And I know people would complain that, oh, it's heel versus heel, but Pac's not really a heel, or he hasn't really been a heelish.
He's just a badass. And he really hasn't. He didn't let Moxley use the broom because he didn't want to do shit like that. So
Moxley fucked him over
You can argue the low blow thing to Hangman, who is a fan favorite. You can argue that he does go for that last 3 matches. So there is that. But yeah, Pac on his winning record, and he's really popular despite, like you said, he's a heel, but he gets the reaction he wants, essentially.
Yeah.
And the thing that the last bit I will note on this, if we were going to say that Pac was just a true heel, I don't think he would be doing the red arrow or black arrow or whatever you want to call it. I don't think that would be a finish for him because I think he's...
No, I disagree, because in Dragon Gate he was a true heel and he was doing that all the time.
I don't even know, I haven't watched enough Dragon Gate to say that he was definitely a true heel, but I just feel like he knows enough that with an American audience that doing flips, you're going to always get that positive reaction from your high-flying flippy move. And that might just be like a WWE thing that's implanted into my mind. Because I guess they do let Sammy G and everyone else do flippy shit. But I just think that Pac is someone who would think about it and be like, I've got all these other moves I can do. So. And then let's go to the tag team division. Number 1 this week, the Lucha Brothers. Last week, also number 1. Number 2, Proud and Powerful. Last week, not even ranked. Did they have a match, though, last week? That's what I'm... Oh, well, they did win against the Young Bucks at Full Gear, so that makes sense. Young Bucks coming in at number 3 last week, also number 3. The Best Friends in at number 4 last week at number 5. The Dark Order in at number 5 last week at number 4. This removes Private Party from the rankings entirely. Last week in at number 2, which tells me that they were only placed at number 2 because they had won that number 1 contenders match and otherwise are now essentially out of it.
They've dropped off, not just in the rankings, but kind of in a sense where they were really hot for a while, and I really think they lost that heat.
It would have been hard to maintain it, I feel like. I think they were hot based upon the situation, based upon the crowds, based upon everything like that. And they are a very good team, very talented team, but I think that you weren't going to give them the titles because it was the first championship. So that's not the run or the way you were going to go about it. So I think that it would have been hard anyway to keep them going and really maintain that push. And I'll actually talk about this. I'll note this just coming off of the rankings, and I know that Dark is airing right now, so I don't think it's that big of a deal to talk about. The Best Friends actually beat Private Party on this week's episode of Dark. So that to me implies that the Best Friends are going to be moving up the rankings, and we're still not going to see Private Party back on this ranking. So who knows when or if we'll see Private Party really get a chance to move up with all of these good teams in this division. I mean, I'm just looking at it, and I'm telling you, it's going to be tough.
It will be tough, but honestly, they're a really great team, and if you want to get that heat back, I don't think it'll be too hard. I think you can, because they're definitely cooled down right now, but that's fine, like you said, but because you're not going to have them win the titles right now.
Right.
But it's something you can do in the future, and I think you can get people just as hyped and excited for them potentially winning the titles, especially when you think it's more realistic that they can win the titles.
Right. I just think that it's kind of, I don't know if I hate it or if I'm upset about it, but it's just like, okay, so we pull Private Party off of this ranking and keep the Young Bucks on the ranking, but both teams lost this week, important matches. So why are they? And the Young Bucks lost to the team that took the number 2 spot. You know what I mean? So it's just I like it otherwise because the Best Friends won, the Dark Order. The Best Friends didn't win. So I mean, it's kind of confusing. There's a lot that is a little bit confusing about the rankings. The Dark Order did win on this week's episode and moved down a spot. So that's kind of where I started to take notice of where this is a little confusing.
Yeah, it seems a little unclear, and I wish they would. If you're going to be putting out these rankings every week, I would like it to be a little more clear.
Yeah, because like I said, if Private Party was number 2 last week and simply lost, then the only I do understand it because they did win a number 1 contenders match, so that's how they got into the match. So that's how they were number 2 in the rankings and all of this. Yeah. But It's just I don't know. I guess I like it a lot, actually. I mean, the more that the more I break it down, and the more that it kind of does make sense. My biggest gripe literally is just that the Young Bucks are 3 after losing to Proud and Powerful, who are 2. My thing is the Young Bucks should be like 5, and then Best Friends could have been 3, Dark Order could have been 4, or even Dark Order at 3, Best Friends stay at 4.
Because it doesn't matter if the Young Bucks are 5 also, because it's not like the Young Bucks are going to drop off the world.
Yeah, exactly. They could, well, and the thing about the Young Bucks is they could lose, and just pick up 3 wins in a row against literally any 3 teams.
Yeah.
And I automatically would understand them being put at number 2 on the rankings, which then you can easily put them in a number 1 contenders match with whoever is number 1. Like, they're a team that is very easy to book into a position where they can skyrocket up your rankings. It's like, that's, I guess, my biggest gripe. Not the fact that Private Party was pulled, but the fact that the Young Bucks didn't even move.
Drop, yeah.
Despite losing to the team who was, like, it was such an important victory to beat the Young Bucks at their number 2. So, I mean, that's it. Otherwise, I like these rankings for the tag teams. Last, we'll talk about the women's rankings. Coming in at number 1, Britt Baker after last week at number 2. Hikaru Shida at number 2 after last week at number 3. Emi Sakura drops down to number 3 after losing her number 1 contenders match, which I really like. Nyla Rose at number 4, last week at number 5. Allie at number 5, last week at number 4. Allie really hasn't done anything to impress anybody or do anything different.
No, not at all.
Nyla Rose able to pick up a win last week, so that was good. Emi Sakura lost, but only falls number 3, so they're still able to like maintain her as like an upper mid-card type of wrestler, which I think is really smart.
Yeah, I like that they're keeping her in that spot. I think 3 is actually the perfect number for her because, like you said, mid-card, and she's still good. Like, she's older, but she's really still got it, and she can really get people hyped for her very quickly, even while she's pulling people's hair. So I don't know. I like these rankings. I think it makes sense. You have Britt Baker at number 1, Hikaru Shida at number 2. I would love to see them have a match for a contendership. That would be awesome.
Yep, dude. That's why I saved the women's division for last, just because, simply put, it's so well done in the rankings. Like, there's nothing I could really argue about it.
Got Nyla on the rise.
I like, Nyla on the rise. Emi moving down to a perfect slot after losing a championship match, and really puts you in a position where I'd like to see Nyla and Emi. Because Emi is someone who can work and make Nyla look really good, and it would be a really good win for Nyla after beating someone who was just a number 1 contender. This is now the time to do that. Waiting a couple more weeks might be a little bit. It just won't mean as much. But if you do it right now, it's the perfect timing to do it. And I think that would be really smart, either on Dark or Dynamite. Have that match, Emi versus Nyla, and as you said, Britt versus Hikaru.
Yeah. The only woman who I really want to see get on these rankings is somebody who hasn't had a lot of matches. I want Penelope Ford to have more of a prominent stance in AEW.
Yes, I do too, even if it is through the storyline with Kip Sabian and Joey, just the opportunity to be on television and get that experience, because the thing I think...
That would be great. If Jericho put Penelope Ford, sorry to cut you off, in the inner circle, she would be perfect.
And that would actually benefit someone like Kip too, because I would have to, basically just because they just put Penelope with Kip, that would be perfect if you bring them both along, and it gives Kip an opportunity as well to shine. I do think that is pairing a lot of new faces with Jericho.
It is.
And I think, like I said, Penelope on TV, she needs that opportunity to be on TV because she's good, talented, can do a lot of really good, impressive moves, but she just seems scared of the camera or something. Like, I don't know how else to put it, because when she goes out there, it's just like totally regular faced. I gotta do everything really perfect, and I'm not really gonna go outside of my box to do anything like way different, or like, and she's done everything fine, everything relatively smooth that I've seen in any match, so there's not a lot to complain about there. But yeah, and I think the person that I would like to see get an opportunity on these rankings would be someone like Priscilla Kelly. She also hasn't gotten much of an opportunity in AEW yet, which is totally understandable, because just looking at some of the Joshi women they've brought in, you have a lot to compete with, and they've done a good job at establishing that, showing like Emi, Hikaru, women that we're not totally familiar with but are talented, are being ranked early, and then we'll get on to seeing the Priscillas and the other women like that, you know?
Yeah, Bea Priestley's and whatnot.
Yeah, she's someone else that is noticeably, like, off of this ranking because of her losses, and it makes total sense. But someone else you could see easily make a crack into this division. So the AEW's women's division is definitely like low-key really good. Yeah, heating up is a great word for it. And the more I get to see new faces like Big Swole and just all of these women, you know what I mean? It's been Shaza McKenzie, Sign Shaza, you know, things like that. It's been so cool to see different women and new faces in AEW. So yeah, I'm definitely been impressed with the women's division and how it's come together, because I will say I was kind of worried, especially they weren't really able to bring in like the Tessas and everyone that we had expected beforehand. So, and a lot of the really talented women had sort of gotten signed up just before, or had been involved in things like the Mae Young Classic, so you weren't sure how it was going to shake out, but they did a great job.
And I wish they would sign Mercedes, but I understand that that's just not going to happen. And I found out why, because she has a pension as a retired police officer, and she doesn't want to lose that.
Nope. So, hey, that works, man. You know, as long as she gets to show up once in a while and be utilized. And I think that's really the best in some cases, because she's super talented but would have never really had an opportunity to rise. So when they do use her and utilize her, she will be good. And if they, hell, you never know. Never say never in wrestling, where down the line, if she happens to catch steam and gets that opportunity to even just have some type of title run, a short title run or something, would be interesting. So you never know. Different things happen in professional wrestling, but it is cool to see the women's division really start to shake itself out and become something worth talking about in AEW every week. So I'm curious to see how that will change going into next week's rankings. But that does wrap everything up essentially for this week's episode of the All Elite Podcast. But if you are tuning in live right now, make sure you stay tuned after we close everything up. I do have our Joey Janela interview from StarCast 4 that we will be showing at the end of this episode. That is news to even our boy AJ. So AJ, once we wrap things up here, you yourself can head over to Twitch, or what is it, Twitter or Facebook. Check it out. Decent little, it's just short little 4-minute interview with Joey at StarCast. We talked about a couple different things. We did answer the question if there would be another Joey Janela's spring break after the 4th one. So tune in for the answer to that. Otherwise, AJ, go ahead and plug your social media before we wrap things up.
You can follow me on Twitter at BigMatchAJ, and you can follow me on Instagram at AJTheFitzy.
And as always, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at All Elite Podcast. Catch us on Instagram at All Elite Everything. You can check out our website, which we are in the process of updating much more often, alleliteeverything.com. That's where you will be able to find the Joey Janela interview. If you don't catch it at the end of this podcast, we will separate it and put it out in its own video and everything on the website and YouTube. So have no fear if you can't stick around. You can also catch us on Facebook at facebook.com/allelitepod. Catch me on Twitter at alleliteandy. That wraps everything up for the podcast this week. Until next time, see ya.
Bye.
Here for an exciting interview edition of the All Elite Podcast. I'm here with your boy, the bad boy, Joey Janela. How you doing, Joey? Enjoying your time at StarCast so far?
Yeah, StarCast is always a blast. I'm always having a great time meeting fans and, you know, putting a face to a lot of the people that hit me up on Twitter and Instagram. And I know them I have a close relationship with my fans. And, you know, it's nice putting a face with the handle of the Instagram and the Twitters.
What's it like working the AEW schedule? For some people, this is a heavier schedule, but for you, it's a lot lighter. It's like a vacation.
Very easy schedule. I last 4 years, I've been working every weekend, working 2, 3, 4, 5 times a week. Now I'm wrestling once a week and doing TV. It's so different, but it's so interesting, and it's a great learning experience. And I think I'm thriving right now. I've never done TV, so I think I'm thriving right now in the early stages of All Elite Wrestling.
Yeah, you're absolutely thriving. Getting to work a couple of matches with Kenny Omega, including an unsanctioned match. How was that to bring Omega to your zone?
That's awesome. The reason I signed to AEW is to work with guys like Omega and Moxley, and I both knocked them out of the park already. And within a year of me signing on the dotted line, within a year of my knee injury, and it's just, man, it's just awesome, man. You know, the week of the first Kenny match last year, I had surgery on my knee. A year later, I tore it down with Kenny Omega on TV. The second Kenny Omega match, but it's just, it's awesome, dude. It's like a dream come true. I'm getting to work with some of the best wrestlers in the world, and only working with them will make me better, a better performer. And we're all trying to get through this TV thing together, and a lot of us are new to it, so it's interesting.
A lot of you are new to it, including Marco and Jungle Boy, a couple guys that you helped make a name for themselves on the independent circuit. How is it seeing them really thrive in this zone?
Those guys are great. Not an ego on them. The most humble fucking kids you'll ever meet in your life. I wish I was that humble when I was their age. I wish I didn't have an attitude. I wish that, I could look into the future and look at these kids and see what they're doing and what they've accomplished in such a short amount of time and not have a ego in my body. But apparently that wasn't the case. That's why it took me so long to get to this position. But a lot of people, a lot of the new wrestlers who are coming into business can definitely learn from those guys and realize, just have fun, don't have an ego, and if you get too much too soon, just keep on working hard and keep on trying to get better.
Are there any other talents in Game Changer on the independent circuit you'd like to see work with you in AEW?
Alex Zane is phenomenal, and Blake Christian's phenomenal. Tony Deppen, of course, one of the best workers in wrestling. He'll be signed somewhere soon, but I just think like a lot of these guys, FE now, and there's a guy coming up, Danhausen, who has a lot of character, who we're going to start using at GCW. I just think these guys are awesome, and I'm happy to see without me and a lot of the guys getting signed that the independent scene is developing new talents and they're thriving.
And finally, next April is Joey Janela's Spring Break 4. Is this the final spring break, or is there a chance we're going to see more in the future?
20 spring break. Spring break is forever, till the day I die. So unless I die after this spring break, there'll be spring break every year, and it's going to get bigger and bigger this year. This year, 5,000 seats. Last year, we had 2 shows with just a little bit under 1,000. Year before we did over 2,000. The first year we did over 1,000. So this year is 5,000. And I think we have a lot of talent that we can showcase that will get us to that point and make this the biggest spring break success story of all time.
That's awesome, Joey. Happy to hear it. Thank you so much for the interview.
This is the bad boy Joey Janela, and you're listening to the All Elite Podcast.